The fantasy basketball playoffs are where seasons are won or completely destroyed. For months, managers grind through injuries, waiver wires, late-night lineup changes, and endless stat watching. But once the playoffs arrive, everything changes. Every move matters. Every lineup decision could mean the difference between a championship and going home early. And this week, the fantasy basketball landscape shifted in a massive way because something happened that nobody expected. A performance so historic that it immediately shook the entire fantasy world. That performance came from one player, Bam Adebayo. Yes, the Miami Heat big man just delivered one of the most unbelievable scoring explosions the NBA has ever seen. In a single game against the Washington Wizards, Adebayo exploded for 83 points, the second highest scoring performance in NBA history. Only Wilt Chamberlain and his legendary 100-point game still sit above it. And it even surpassed the iconic 81-point performance from Kobe Bryant. Let that sink in. A center known primarily for defense, rebounding, and playmaking suddenly dropped one of the greatest scoring games the league has ever seen. And it didn't happen quietly. Adebayo came out absolutely unstoppable from the opening tip. He scored 31 points in the first quarter alone, setting a new franchise record for the Miami Heat. By halftime, he already had 43. By the end of the third quarter, he had 62. At that point, fantasy managers watching the game were probably doing double takes, because what started as a great night turned into a historic fantasy eruption. He finished the game shooting 20 for 43 from the field, knocking down 7 three-pointers, and drawing an incredible number of fouls on his way to 36 made free throws, another single-game NBA record. And if you were lucky enough to have Adebayo on your fantasy roster during playoff week, you probably felt like you just hit the lottery. But while some fantasy managers were celebrating, others were dealing with the opposite problem. Because one of the most important fantasy stars in the league just went down, Tyrese Maxey. Maxey has been having an absolutely incredible season for the Philadelphia 76ers, averaging around 29 points and nearly 7 assists per game, carrying a massive offensive workload, and emerging as one of the league's brightest young stars. But late in a game against the Atlanta Hawks, everything changed. In the final seconds, Maxey attempted a steal, collided with a teammate, and injured his right pinky finger. And now the fallout is serious. Reports say Maxey is expected to miss multiple games while being evaluated and treated for the injury, a devastating blow for both the 76ers and fantasy managers heading into the most critical stretch of the season. When a star like Maxey goes down this late in the year, it doesn't just affect one player. It changes the entire fantasy ecosystem, because someone has to absorb those minutes, someone has to take those shots, and suddenly, players who were previously sitting on waiver wires become potential playoff heroes. Two names immediately stand out. First, Kelly Oubre Jr. Oubre has already been producing solid fantasy numbers this season, averaging over 27 fantasy points per game, and now he's positioned to see a major increase in usage with Maxey out of the lineup. More minutes, more shots, more opportunity. And in fantasy playoffs, opportunity is everything. Another player who could benefit is Quentin Grimes. Grimes has quietly been building momentum recently, posting at least 24 fantasy points in 4 straight games, and already seeing an expanded role in Philadelphia's backcourt. With Maxey sidelined, his offensive workload could climb even higher. And if that happens, Grimes could quickly become one of the most valuable late-season pickups in fantasy basketball. But injuries and breakout performances aren't the only storylines shaping the fantasy playoffs right now. There are also veterans quietly delivering value when many managers least expect it. Take Russell Westbrook, for example. Even late in his career, Westbrook continues to find ways to impact the game across multiple categories. He's maintaining a high usage rate and still filling the stat sheet with scoring, assists, and rebounds, proving that experience and versatility can still win fantasy matchups. In fact, Westbrook recently became the first guard in NBA history to reach 9,000 career rebounds, a reminder that his all-around game remains one of the most unique in basketball history. And then there are players whose fantasy value is starting to trend in the wrong direction. One example is Alperen Sengun. The young center for the Houston Rockets has been excellent overall this season, but recently, turnovers have started to pile up. Over a short stretch of games, Sengun recorded 24 turnovers in just 4 games, which can significantly damage fantasy value in category leagues. In points leagues, that might not matter as much, but in competitive fantasy playoff matchups, every turnover counts. Another player drawing concern is Miles Turner. Now with the Milwaukee Bucks, Turner's rebounding numbers have dropped significantly, averaging just 5.5 rebounds per game, the lowest of his career. For a starting center, that's a serious problem, especially in fantasy formats where rebounds can swing entire matchups. And with injuries affecting stars like Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Bucks' rotation has been shifting in ways that could further impact Turner's value. All of this highlights one crucial truth about fantasy basketball playoffs. Talent matters, but timing matters more. The managers who win championships are rarely the ones who drafted the perfect team. They're the ones who adapt. They notice trends early. They grab the right players off waivers. They pivot when injuries happen, and they take advantage of moments like this. Because right now, the fantasy landscape is changing fast. A historic 83-point explosion from Bam Adebayo, a critical injury to Tyrese Maxey, unexpected value from veterans like Russell Westbrook, and rising opportunities for players like Kelly Oubre Jr. and Quentin Grimes. All of it is happening at the exact moment when fantasy championships are on the line, which means the next move you make could decide your entire season. So the question is simple. Are you paying attention to the trends, or are you about to get eliminated by them? Because in fantasy basketball playoffs, history can happen any night. And sometimes it takes just one unbelievable performance to change everything.